Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna and this is 4 Paws in a Book. I make book and lifestyle related content, so if that's something that you're interested in, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the books that I've read so far in the month of September. So far in the month of September, I have finished 7 books. I'm in the middle of 2 of them. So clearly not the same level of books that I was reading in the month of August. However, we knew that was going to happen. I don't want to say I'm slumpy because I'm not, but I'm not reading at the level that I did in the last month. I think that's fine. I think that there are times where you can kind of ebb and flow, and there's just things that I wanted to do instead of reading, and that's fine. So let's talk about it. I have some pretty chunky fantasy books on here, which also might attribute to the not feeling like I'm as accomplished. You forget to take into consideration that it's a 600-page book, and so you're like, okay, I finished a book, but it took me all week to do it, rather than, your YAs that take you a day to read. So there's something to be said for that. But I do have a mixed bag of books to talk to you about here. If you're new to my mid-month wrap-ups, during the middle of the month, I just talk about the books in chronological order. I'll tell you the star ratings and what I think about them, but I won't have any stats or anything like that. Then when I get to my end-of-month wrap-up, I will talk about these books just briefly, just kind of mention them, but that video will be full of stats and fun things. Today, we're just here to talk about books. The first book that I finished in the month of September was Karen by Rebecca Morrow. I do have an entire video about this one. It's the first time in a long time that I have done a video just on one specific book. So if you like those type of videos, let me know. Maybe I can do more of them. Normally I have more than one book in a video vlog style thing. That video is more discussing who this author is. Rebecca Morrow is a pseudonym for a New York Times bestselling author, but there's a big controversy about who it actually was, so I'll link that video up above. So as far as the actual book is concerned, this was just an average book. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. On the plus side, it was very bingeable, very readable. I think I read this in maybe 2 days, physically reading, and I don't physically read very quickly anymore. Thank you, audiobooks. But the writing style was just kind of average. The characters, kind of average. I think that if there wasn't the controversy behind this book, I wouldn't have picked it up. I wouldn't have been as invested in it. So I gave it 3.5 stars. It's a very easy reading experience. It's a bingeable type of soapy type of book. Do look for trigger warnings for this. This obviously does have a lot of religious trauma involved in it. So know that going in. It can be a little bit too relatable at times. But I did tab and annotate this, so it was a fun experience. But it's not generally my cup of tea as far as books. I gave it 3.5 stars. Then I finished The Passing Playbook by Isaac Fitzsimmons. This is a YA contemporary about a trans boy who moves to a new school, and he is trying to just pass as male, not as a trans male. And then he tries to join the soccer team. This was really cute, very sweet. There is a really soft queer romance in this, but the majority of this book is just talking about him trying to figure out who he is, his place in his new school, on his team, that kind of things. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. Like I said, it's really cute. YA contemporary is not really my genre anymore. I don't read a lot of it, but then when I do, I kind of get all in my feels again. I think if you liked this, you would also like Stay Gold by Toby McSmith and Home Field Advantage by Dahlia Adler. I think both of those have similar concepts. If you liked this one, you'd probably like those two. Vice versa, if you liked those two, you'd probably like this one as well. Then we got into what could potentially be my favorite book of the year, and that is Ashes of the Sun by Django Wexler. This is a book that was not even on my radar as of a couple of months ago. And Cassidy was talking about it, Mel was talking about it. There's so many people that started talking about it, and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna pick it up. And this was so good. This is about 2 siblings, brother and a sister, and the sister was taken away by the Empire at a very young age and trained to be a warrior for this empire. And then the brother does not like what happened to his family as a result of that, what happened to him as a result of it. So he has spent his entire life training to defeat the Empire. So you have these like two sides of this moral battle, essentially, and you have the POV characters back and forth, going back from Maya to Geyer. It was so well done. It was my perfect blend of fantasy, or my style of fantasy. There's the thing with adult fantasies a lot of times is you have this huge cast of characters and you have to remember what's going on with everyone. And this one, there's two main stories going on, right? Each main character does have like their little group that's kind of going along with them, but the main story is Maya and Geyer and their quests, right? And it was beautifully done. The world building was descriptive, but not in a way that was like flowery and prosy and like overwritten. It was so perfect. Like there was never White Room syndrome, but it wasn't too much, right? Do you get what I'm saying? I'm gonna have an entire vlog about this and a couple of other books next week, potentially. We're really trying. So I'll go into more detail about it then, but needless to say, I did give this 5 stars. Next up, I finally finished The Atlas 6 by Holly Blake. I've been reading this book for like a month, and I ended up giving this one a 3.5 stars. I think part of that rating is because it took me so long to read it. I was kind of out of the story and then back in it. This is one of those books that you're following 6 main characters, and there were some characters I really loved and cared about, but then there were also some that like I didn't care that we had a POV from, if that makes sense. Like, we didn't need that. And I know we probably need it going forward into its sequel, but I didn't care at this point. I also feel like the ending was so rushed. Like, we had some definite lulls in the middle, and then the ending was just like, okay, we're done now. And so I'm hoping that it gets expanded a little bit in the sequel. I will definitely read the sequel, but this one I ended up only giving 3.5 stars. I also gave a 3.5 stars to Hurricane Season by Nicole Melby. This is a middle grade story about a girl who is just dealing with way too much for a 12-year-old. She is living with her dad, who has a mental illness. You're not really told what it is at the beginning of it, but he is kind of like schizophrenia, bipolar, something, right? And later on he is diagnosed with something, and I think there's a really good conversation about that, and the mental health in general, but this poor 12-year-old is trying to hide her father's mental illness from the world so that CPS does not come and take her, does not come and like, lock him. She's afraid that they're going to lock him up, because he, kind of gets lost sometimes, or, he goes off and does things. So this follows those two people throughout the hurricane season in their home. So that's summer of whatever it is, July to November or whatever. I don't know. Can't remember. But it's like that 6-month period. There's also a lot of discussion about Vincent Van Gogh and his mental illness, and she was like trying to connect that to her father. There's a lot in this book. This is something that I would definitely give my older and middle graders. There's definitely some serious hard topics in here that you would have to have discussions with. And I don't read middle grade anymore. And so I think for a middle grade, this is great. And a 3.5 star rating is pretty good for me for a middle grade. Lastly, I finished 2 thrillers, so if you have been watching sprints this weekend, you do know that I've finished. The first one was Stay Awake by Megan Golden. This book I was reading for my Patreon exclusive video where I had to stay awake until I finished Stay Awake. Get it? And I did. I finished this in one day. This was actually really good. I think the premise of this is really interesting. And essentially you are like thrown into the story knowing about as much as the main character does, which is nothing. She wakes up and she's in a cab and she has all this writing all over her arm and it's telling her to stay awake. Don't go to sleep. Don't talk to the cops. Don't answer the phone. All of these things. And she has no idea what's going on. She tries to go home. Someone else is living in her house. No one will answer their phone. Her boyfriend has a different number. Everything is just really messed up. So as a reader, I'm terrified. I'm like, that's a biggest fear of mine, is losing control and not knowing what's going on around me. That's a huge fear of mine. And so this was you know, my perfect brand of anxiety, I guess? I don't know. Anyway, I think it was really well done. You're following different perspectives, different timelines as they kind of all converge on each other. And I think it was really well written. I ended up giving it 4 stars. It's not as good as The Night Swim, but that book is God tier. That one was so good. This one would probably end up being second in the books that I've read from her. So I will be posting my vlog for this for my Patreons. My link is down below if you would like to join. Lastly, I finished 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. This one I'm really torn on. I ended up giving it 3 stars. The beginning was really interesting, and we kind of didn't know where we were going, and you're kind of in the mind of this one central character, so it kind of felt a little bit claustrophobic, because you're not bouncing around from other characters' POVs, and so, I liked that for a time, but then I also, there were also some other plots that, I didn't understand at the end. Why did we throw these things in here? And it wasn't like they were red herrings. It was almost like we just kind of forgot about a couple of characters that I actually really liked. I also think that this book, while it's everyone says oh, it spoils these other stories, and I think maybe it spoils a couple of classic murder mysteries in a very vague way. They're oh, by the way, this person is the killer, but not by name or anything like that. I still think it's pretty vague in the sense that, if I were to go and read that Agatha Christie novel, I wouldn't necessarily put the puzzle pieces together, if that makes sense. My problem with that is that I don't think that this book stood on its own. It relied so heavily on those other 8 stories, those other 8 murder mysteries, that it was, I don't know, I think it wasn't its own story, if that makes sense. I think that, on its own, it was a little bit weak. Also, why did we have to add The Cuckoo's Calling? That's just me. Gave it 3 stars. It's not a bad book, but it's definitely not a favorite thriller of mine. However, I'm really picky with my thrillers, so take that how you will. This might be your cup of tea. Okay, those are the books that I have finished. I still am in the middle of 2 books. I am working on There Is No Devil by Sophie Lark. I'm about halfway through this one. It should not take me a week to read this book. And that is all I will say on this matter. That's how much I'm enjoying it. And then lastly, I am working on Malice by John Gwynne. I'm only about 130 pages into this, so I do need to work on this one over the next couple of days and try to get this one knocked out. But it's a chunky fantasy. It's a historical fantasy. This is a dense book, and I'm struggling a bit with it. So we'll see. This one will also be in that vlog with Ashes of the Sun. That is all I have for you today. Let me know down in the comments below what book you are really enjoying right now or that you have most recently enjoyed. And if you're not feeling chatty, you can put a sword emoji for Malice, since we were just talking about that. If you're new here and you have not yet subscribed, there's a little red button that you can do so down below the video. If you'd like to hang out with me more, I do have my very own Patreon. We have an exclusive Discord and other fun perks. My link for that is down below, as well as my link to my Twitter, Instagram, and Goodreads. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.